let's now implement the getIndices method over here. Okay, so now you can see that as the input, we take a string array and also another string. And then the return value is going to be an integer array. That means we have to internally create a new array of type integer array, and then return that particular array as a return value. That's what we're going to do. Okay, so now I assume you already read this, but I'm going to illustrate to you in the iPad. Okay, basically we're going to count. Basically, first of all, we're going to count the number of occurrences of string S in string array SA, and then we want to return all the positions in which string S is stored in SA. Okay, let's see some example over here. Okay, now let's see this example over here. The same as what you were given in the utilities tester. So now what about, let me just see the method name again. So getIndices, okay? So now if I say getIndices, let's see, for example, if I say SA, okay, as the array to be searched for, and then first of all, if I simply say A, what's going to happen? Okay, let's just see this one first. So now you can see that SA is already here. Okay, so now we're going to iterate through it, and then this method is very related to the number of occurrences which we did in the previous video. You should really review that one before you do this particular method. Okay, so now let's see over here. Let's say A is over here, so we're going to go over the array and see every occurrence of A. So that's the first occurrence, second occurrence, and third occurrence, and fourth occurrence. So we got 4 occurrences of A. So that means accordingly, what we should do is we should create an array of size 4. So that means this is going to return an array of exactly size 4. And the 4 over here is determined by the number of occurrences of this particular input value over here, right? So it's going to be 0, 1, 2, and 3. So now here comes the a little bit more confusing part. So now what should be the value for this array over here? So these are representing the indices of array of value A occurring at SA. So for example, over here, you can see that over here, the first occurrence of A is at index 2. So that means we should put 2 over here. Okay, so that means the first occurrence of A is at index 2 in SA. Okay, and the second occurrence of A is at index 6 over here, and then I'm gonna put 6 over here. So the second element in the returning array means the second occurrence of A is at index 6 in the source array SA. Okay, similarly, we're gonna put 7 and we're gonna put 9 over here. Okay, let's do one more example, and then I will give you the idea about how we can program this, which is not too difficult, but it's more difficult than what we did before. Okay, so now let's do one more. What about let's do 2 more. Let's do, first of all, let's say we got, what about C over here? Okay, we get indices, and then we have C over here. Now we should definitely return an array of size what? So now that depends on how many occurrences there are for C in SA. So now we can, let's say we do blue over here. So now C is like this. So C occurs at here, C occurs at here, second occurrence, and we only got 2 occurrences. And then so that means what we will do, first of all, we will create an array of size 2 accordingly over here to be returned 0 and 1. And then what we will do is we're gonna put the first occurrence for C. Let me use some color. What about the first occurrence? The first occurrence for C in SA is over here, index 1. And the second occurrence of C in SA is over here, index 4. Okay, so that's why we'll put 4 over here. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Now, question is, what about I put E over here? And then again, the size of the return array depends on the number of occurrences of the input value over here. So now in this case, let me use orange here. So now, how many occurrences are there for E in SA? None, 0. That means we're going to create an array of size 0, which means empty array accordingly. Okay? So hopefully you see the idea about how between the input and output. So now, how do we go about and do it? Apparently, we have to split this method here into several steps, right? So now you can think about, let's say, take this example for A. Okay, just take this for example. Okay, I'm going to show you exactly how we're going to do, and then we'll go ahead doing it in Java. Okay, so now first of all, we want to know the number of occurrences in SA for A, which we did in the previous method over here, right? We did and say if the return value should be 4. You can also review the previous video about how you can do this method here. Okay, it's a helper method. So now we know that it's going to return 4. So once we get a 4 over here, what we can do is we can create an array of certain of the size accordingly. So what we will do is we'll create an array, local array. Let me just call that maybe indices, for example, because eventually I'm going to return all the indices, and then I'm going to create an array of size 4. Okay, 0, 1, 2, and 3. Now the question is, how do I go about filling in the contents of this array? Okay, I'll give you an idea. So it turns out we have to use 2 separate loop counter for doing this. Let me illustrate to you why. Let me illustrate to you. Apparently, you have to use a loop counter called I, which will go from 0 until SA.length -1. If you only use this loop counter over here, let's say you would say the very naive implementation is to say, as soon as I hit, for example, the first occurrence of A, I'm going to store the number 2 over here at certain position. The most naive way would be, why don't I just store 2 here at position 2 over here? But that's not good, because as soon as you see the second occurrence of A over here, and then you can see the index is 6, and now if you try to store in index 6, you will get the array index out of bound exception because there's no index 6. So that means the 2 over here and the 6 over here is not really about where you should store in the indices array. They are simply about the values you should store into certain indices in the indices array. Okay, but now how do we know where to store? We need a separate counter. Okay, basically what we need to do over here is over here you gotta think about in this way. Okay, let me just get it back. Okay, otherwise it's bad. Okay, so now how do we go about do it? So now basically you can see that the reason that we should store, as I said before, because 2 over here is the very first occurrence of A. So that's why we should store that in the first position in the indices array. In the first position means index 0, and then we'll put 2. And then 6 is the second occurrence of A. That's why we should store in position 2, which is index 1, etc. So that means we should really try to have another counter, maybe called J over here, which will indicate the number of occurrences we are in right now. Okay, so now, for example, J would be initially just 0. Okay, initially just 0. I'll show you how that works. Okay, let me just write it a little bit better. Okay, J over here, initially it would just be 0. So J indicates where you should store the current index we find for A into. Okay, so now as soon as we find out the first occurrence, let me use a different color here. As soon as we find out the first occurrence of A, okay, we're gonna store indices at position J, and then we're gonna store into this, and then we want to store whatever SA. We're gonna store, sorry, beg your pardon, I'm gonna store I into it. Okay, let's see what this really means. In this case, you can see that indices at position at the moment J is simply just 0, right? So we're going to store in this particular position over here. What we're going to store in it? The value of I, which is over here, right? That's the first occurrence. So I will store 2 into it. Okay, so now after that, so every time after you store something into the indices array, we're going to increment J. So now increment J from 0 and then to 1. Okay, so now we keep going. I will also keep going to see what the next occurrence for A will be. So now this is the second occurrence of A. So now in this case, I would be just 6 over here. Okay, and then, so now what should we do? We do indices at position J. In this case, it will be 1. Indices at position 1 is assigned to the value of I, which is 6. That means assigned to index 1 over here, the value 6. Okay, that's about the second iteration. And then similarly, when we reach the third iteration over here, that may, oh, and also of course after the previous one, we also increment the J value from 1 to 2. Okay, and then the third iteration, the J value is now 2 and the I value is now 7. So now store into the position index number 2 over here into the indices array, and then store the value 7. Okay, so that's how we do this one here. Okay, so that's one here, right? And then finally, when we reach the last occurrence of A over here, we can see that at the moment I value is 9. Okay, of course, in the previous one, we also increment the value of J from 2 to 3. And then you will see that we should store at position 3 in the array, and then we should store the value of 9 over here. So now at position 3, we should store the value of 9. Okay, you can see that's how that works conceptually. Hopefully, it's not too bad to see from the diagram. But to really do this in Java, apparently we need the 2 loop counters we say. And then you got to be careful about when to reassign and when to increment the I and J. Okay, I'll show you now. Okay, once you get a concept over here, let's now translate that into Java. Okay, this is what I will do. First of all, I want to know how large the return array should be. So first of all, I can call the, let me just call that number of occurrences, or I can just say number of occurrences. What about that? Okay, NOC is assigned to this dot number of occurrences, which I just defined previously in the previous video. Okay, you can look at that video if you like, if you to review how we did it. Okay, and SA and S. So basically, we're calling the helper method over there to know exactly how many times S occurs in SA, which may be 0, can be 1, can be 2, but whatever this NOC, number of occurrences, this NOC is going to determine the size of the returning array for this method. So now we can say integer array, and then I call it indices, right? As before, indices over here. And then I'll say indices is assigned to a new integer array of size NOC, number of occurrences. Okay, and then I'm gonna have the value of J, which I talk about over here. J is gonna be J. It will be indicating, okay, integer J is assigned to 0 to begin with, indicating where to store in indices the next location of S occurrence in SA. Okay, so it's a little bit long sentence, but hopefully if you got what I did over here in the diagram, hopefully the sentence makes sense to you. Okay, of course we're gonna keep incrementing J in some place. Okay, so now we're gonna go over the array of SA over here using I from 0 until SA the length minus 1. Okay, so we'll say integer I is assigned to 0, I is less than SA the length, and then I plus plus. Okay, and then, so now a very common mistake, or if you really get confused, you might simply say J plus plus over here. But if you simply, okay, let me just do another thing over here. Okay, and then I'm gonna say if the current one I'm looking at, for example, over here, if the current element I'm looking at right now is really matching A, that means it's one of the occurrences I have. So what I should do is I should store the current I value into the corresponding position in indices, right? That's what I should do. Okay, let's do that first. I'll say if SA at position I dot equals, remember use dot equals for string value. In that case, we'll say indices is assigned to I. Indices, sorry. indices at position j. Okay, exactly what we said before. Over here, you can see indices at position j is assigned to I, right? Like that. Okay, so now if I accidentally put this j++ outside the if statements, what does that mean? That means j is going to be incremented whenever I is incremented. So that means the j is not going to have the value as I said before. So that means j is, well, let me give you an idea. If you do j++ over here, what does that mean? Outside the if statements. That means you will increment the value of j even if you don't see the match for A, right? So let's say that means you will increment j for every iteration to get in sync with I. So that means after the first iteration, you will increment j from 0 to 1, and then from 1 to 2. And now, when I first say this for the value of A over here, so now the j value will just be 2. So that means I will store in 2 over here the value of 2, which is not right. Okay, so that's completely wrong. Okay, just be careful. So the correct way of doing it is you only try to increment j when you have already occupied the next slot in the indices array. So you want to know where the next should be stored. Okay, that's why you put it here. And then finally, you want to say over here, return indices over here. Okay, you can see that over here we start with calculating the number of occurrences. I'm just using this one over here as a helper method. Let's say if you were not given this method to program first, you should definitely do this just by yourself. Either put it here to make the method longer, or you can simply just define your helper method by yourself. And then after this, we create a new array of size, the number of occurrences for this particular string accordingly, and then we do the trick about I and j. Okay, as I illustrated. Okay, that's about how this method should be done. It's not, you can see the code is very neat, but the idea behind is quite sophisticated. So you got to be careful about how to go about programming this. Okay, let's test very quickly. Okay, go to utilities tester, and that's the last section we have. So we got get indices A. So we got the same array. We have the same array over here. Okay, let's just see a few example. Okay, let's now do the test. Utilities tester. Okay, let's see over here. Let's say get indices A. As we said before, it should be 2679. So 2679, right? And also, what about B over here? For B has only one occurrence over here, if you can see, at position 3. So that means only returning a single an array of size just 1. Okay, and then with only 3. And what about the next one? What about for C over here? C has 1, 2, and the blue one. 2 occurrences. That should be 1 and 4. Okay, that's why you got 1 and 4 over here. And then what about D? For D, you have 0, 5, and 8. So that's why you got 0, 5, and 8 over here. Okay, so now what about E? So you can see that for E simply does not exist in the array. You can see there's no occurrence of E. So that means at the first step over here, so when you try to calculate this SA and then E, right? In that case, E does not exist. So the return value from this NOC will just be 0. That means you will create an array of size 0 accordingly. Okay. So now finally, let's have a look at others over here. So now if I pass empty array over here, empty array, that means any value does not have any occurrences in the empty array. So that means the result will just be empty for the last 2 cases. Okay. So that's about it. So hopefully you can just review, first of all, the concept about how we go about solving the problem on the paper, and then how I translated the concept almost straightforwardly into the Java code.